here to share with you a quick tutorial on how to create a beautiful embroidered gladiola. So to start out, I've got our pattern printed on our fabric here. This is the pattern for the mini glad. And then I also have this lovely pattern. Oh, I can't get far enough away from it. I have this lovely pattern for a stalk of glads with a saying, live life in full bloom. So the concept for this flower will be the same on either pattern. So I'm gonna run through with you the way I would create this flower, how I would incorporate different colors and that sort of thing. And you can of course change up the colors or add different kind of elements in there if you'd like, but this is just how I would do it. So first things first, when I am starting a pattern like this, I always like to keep the printed version with me as well, just so that I can refer back to it, because sometimes when you're looking at it on the fabric, it's not printed on there really dark because we don't want it to be so bold that if you don't hit your lines exactly, that you can see it afterwards. So keeping the printed copy of the pattern with you is very helpful, I find. It can give you a better indication of which way you want your stitches to run, which is also something that you can actually write it onto the pattern beforehand if you'd like, to give you an idea. So like on a leaf like, or sorry, a petal like this, I'm gonna work my stitches kind of in around, kind of straight in the center and working kind of around on the outside, so they will come together nicely. Always working from kind of the center point out. With these flowers, we're gonna make them a white, yellow, and pink. And I printed myself just a couple of pictures of glads off of the internet to give me a reference or an idea of how we can shade them and make them look a little different. So I'm going to do kind of a cross between these two. I really love how these ones have very defined, kind of defined lines. So I think I'm gonna aim for something more like this using this color palette. So we're gonna get started here. One of the things that I want to do is I want to define these little, I don't know what to call them, the little parts in the middle of the flower. I want to define those, oh, sorry there. I want to define them just so that I know where they're going to be. I don't know that I'll actually, I think I'll finish them off at the end to give them more definition, but I do want to make them stand out a little bit right now so that I will know where they are when the time comes. So I'm actually going to, I'll show you the colors I'm using here. So I've got kind of a darker pink, that one here. I have a lighter pink that will help with a little bit of shading, white, as well as a really nice soft yellow. So my idea here is to have yellow in the center of the flower, and then we'll do white, kind of working our way out from center. We're gonna use the light pink to kind of work our way out from the white, and then the dark pink to define those edges. So for the center of these flowers here, I'm actually going to use the dark pink, and then afterwards I will go in with maybe one strand of our really dark gray, just to define them a little bit more. I might add some white in there, but I am going to start with this pink just to make them pop and to keep them kind of in the same color family, because I think if I used just the gray on its own, it might look really dark and maybe a little bit too bold on them. So I want them to stand out, but not so much that they are the only thing you see when you look at the piece. So using 2 strands of floss, I just divided this floss is 6 strands, so I divided it into 2 strands, which will make them a little bit more delicate. The more strands of floss you use at any given time, the more bold your design will be, or the less they kind of blend together. So for this design, we're going to use 2 strands for pretty much the whole thing. It will take a little bit longer to do our petals using 2 strands, but I think in the end it will be very much worth it. Okay, so starting with these, the little things in the middle of the flower, I am just going to do just kind of a basic satin stitch here. I'm gonna come in. I'm only gonna do, I think, probably 3 stitches on this and then move on to the next one, because as I mentioned, I will work them a little bit more after the fact if I feel like they need it, but I just want to get them on there right now so that I don't end up losing them in the design. Okay, so that's one there. And again, like I said, keep your printed copy of your pattern close by, because even this one, because these lines were very fine anyways, they're a little harder to see on there. So when you look at the printed version, it definitely helps just to get a better idea of where these lines are. I'm just gonna give it one more kind of over top of those because I feel like that one was a little taller there. This last one here. Okay. There we go. So that is those centers there. So now take a peek on here. There's the 3 little ones at the top of there as well. I think I will do those with my pink right now too, just again to make them stand out, and I can always go over them with another color after the fact. I just don't want to lose them in the pattern itself once I start doing my satin stitch. So with these guys, I'm not super concerned about the back of my work right now. I'm not finishing it off and then like restarting my thread with each of these. I'm just moving over to where I need to be. If you want the back of your work to look as nice as the front, you can certainly tie off between each of these. I personally don't feel like it's necessary because I cover up my backs, so no one's gonna see it. But if that bugs you, you absolutely just go for it and do what you gotta do. Too, I'm also going to create kind of the stems coming down. That I will do at the end using a darker color though, because when I'm looking at my pictures here, those ones you can kind of see like the stems have that darker part in them. So I will do that, but at the end once I've got these other parts filled in. Okay, so now I'm going to tie off that part here. Ooh, I don't know if I have my camera up tall enough, so I'm just gonna scoot underneath here. So for tying off, I just go under a few of my other strands and then just do 1 knot or 2 knots. If I was doing this on a surface that was going to be washed or have a little bit more wear and tear, I would for sure weave it in a couple of times and do at least 2 knots just to make sure that they're going to stay put. And one thing to remember too is that you want to have your fabric nice and snug so it sounds like a drum. If it starts loosening up, feel free to tighten up. Just pull on the edges of your fabric and make sure you tighten up that screw every now and again, just to make sure that it's staying where you want it to stay. Okay, so we are going to switch to the yellow now because I'm going to start by working from the inside out. And so again, we're going to use 2 strands of floss. So grab your yellow, divide it into 2. And I like to work with about an arm's, well, not quite an arm's length, maybe 12 to 16 inches of floss at most. I don't like to be retying more often than I have to, but also the longer the piece of floss you are starting with, you may find you either get tangles or the floss itself may start getting kind of fuzzy towards the end. So I find that 12 to 16 inches is kind of the sweet spot there. Okay, so we're going to start with this flower that we just created those on. I think that this will probably be the toughest petal to do. And once we have this one, I think we're going to be smooth sailing from here. So this will give us a good indication of how to kind of get the strokes and the right shape for our petal. Okay, so I'm going to start right in at the bottom here, the center of the petal. And I'm going to do I'm going to end up doing different sizes of stitches, but always kind of working. These ones are going to be more in like a V shape. So you're going to see throughout, I'm going to stagger the length of my stitch, but I'm always going to try and keep it working in that same direction. And you can see here, my stitches themselves right now are not directly beside each other, and that's okay. I'm just going to come back in and fill it in as I see fit. So some of my stitches I'm going to make longer, some are going to be a little shorter, and you can always come back in with either one strand of thread or you can stick with two to start adding a little bit more definition to it. And like most things at the beginning, you might look at it and be like, oh, this isn't exactly what I'm expecting. My biggest tip to you is to keep on going, because they will come together. And embroidery it's an amazing art form where it is very, I don't want to say forgiving, but it is forgiving. You can kind of keep working it until it is what you want it to be. Or if it is not becoming what you want it to be, the nice thing is you can just cut out the stitches that are not working for you and redo them. So you might notice here some of my stitches as I'm working these ones are going to start going through the other thread, and that's okay. That actually, like, it splits the thread and it'll give it another texture in there too, which is nice. But as I work out from the base, I'm going to start trying to curve these a touch, just because I want to give them a little bit more shape. So we're going to just keep following kind of the shape of our petal here. Working through our previous stitches worked. And like I mentioned, if you start working them and you're like, oh, that's not quite right, you can always pull them out. So don't hesitate to do that. Although that being said, I think that sometimes at the very beginning, yeah, it might not look exactly how you anticipate, but if you keep going with it, you might find it comes together just as you hope. So I'm just going to keep going with this. I'll speed it up a little bit for you. And once I get maybe about, probably not too many more stitches here, I'm going to change colors. So change it to the white to start the transition of color, which I think is going to be beautiful. So now I'm going to switch colors and I'm going to switch to white so that we can start working a little bit of shading throughout here. Okay, so again, using 2 strands of white. If you want to have more control over exactly how your thread falls, you can always do 1 strand. I'm going to do 2. My flower is a little bit bigger, so I will stick with 2 and see how it works out. So I'm going to come in over on the side here, and I'm going to just kind of follow my line there. Oopsies. So I think I'll probably end up outlining this with 1 strand of pink. So I'm not going to do too much work kind of on the edges on these lines, but I definitely want to define them a little bit. And it might mean, like with these ones, I'm going to come in and work kind of right through my yellow with white in places, just to help kind of blend those colors. This yellow is light enough that it's not going to be, I don't think it'll be too tough to blend these colors really beautifully. Get a really nice kind of gradient with them. So again, I'm going to do different lengths of stitches. That one was a really long one, which I think will work. And as you can tell too, once I first pull the stitch down, it sometimes stands out a little bit. But then as soon as I start working the next stitch after it, it helps to pull those ones nice and snug, which is great. So this one I'm kind of changing direction a little bit so that I can get this shape here. I'm gonna try and work through the middle of some of these just to split them. It'll help to give it a little bit more definition again. And so you can always kind of drag your thread to see where it's going to hit. So in this case, I want a nice little curve here. So I'm not going to make a very long stitch. There we go. Beautiful. I'm going to come back in through those guys. Just work a tiny bit up from that one, which will continue to give it a little bit of a curve. Remembering too, if you work a lot of stitches kind of in the same spot, it's going to get thicker there, which is great in certain places. You may want it to be thicker, but some places you might not. So in the case of these petals, I think we want them to be a little more delicate. So perhaps we don't want to overwork our area. I did this same kind of embroidery. I called it thread painting when I did it. I did a photo of my dog, and it was really cute how it turned out, but it was a lot of going over the same area again and again, and it was a great learning piece because I wasn't really sure how to create the shape and texture that I wanted. But it turned out with something like that, it was a good one to learn with because I was able to create different depth just by changing my thread shape. So you can see I'm kind of I started working them outwards, and now I'm kind of working them a little more inwards so that I want them to concave in the middle as the petal would. After this white color, I'll work a little bit with white, and then I'm going to go to the really light pink color as well, which I think will look really fun with this. So that one is, oh, I must have a knot on the back. I do have a knot. every now and again, if you notice your thread is not working exactly how you want it to, make sure you check the back of your work. Sometimes you have little knots there that will prevent your thread from pulling through as nicely as you'd like. So now we're going to move on to our pink, again with 2 strands. I think the dark pink, after working this part, I'm pretty sure the dark pink will look better with 1 strand, just to give it a little bit more definition. But this one we'll do 2, and we won't be doing too many stitches with pink, or perhaps we'll just fill in the rest of this area here, which isn't a very big area. And then the pink, the dark pink, will just be our kind of our outline to give it that definition. Okay, so now that I have my flowers mostly filled in, I am actually doing what's called the stem stitch to outline my flower. So I just want to show you how I'm doing that so that you have a better idea when you get going on this. So I've already started down this line here, but I'm just going to continue on. When it comes to the stem stitch, what you're doing, it's similar to the back stitch, but I'm going to kind of hold on to my thread here. I am working down a new spot, and I'm coming back up through, I don't know if you can tell, but that's the spot that I went down through last time. And so that's going to hold my thread kind of where I want it to be. It's helping me to shape these lines. So I'm going down through a new spot, and I'm coming back up through where I went down in the last one. And that's going to give me, it gives it a bit of a more raised look almost, but it also really helps in this case to shape your line. So I've been working it on, I've been holding my loop on this side, but for this one, I want my thread to go in. So I'm going to come back up through there, but I'm going to have my thread on that side so it holds it where I want it to be, versus if it was on the other side of this, it would get pushed out further, which I do not want. So going down through one and back up through the other. So I've gone back over to my other side here. Although I probably, actually that one, I'm gonna, oopsies, it's freeing my thread. I'm gonna have that one go onto that side too, just so that it holds it in place. I'm coming around the corner here. So the key to actually getting really nice rounded corners as well is to work nice small stitches around them, and that will really help. And whenever I'm working lines too, one of the things I always make sure is that I'm working right into the center of my line, and that will ensure that my lines remain straight, even when my thread is being pulled a little bit, because sometimes it can look like you want to kind of nudge over your stitches a little bit to get them to line up with other stitches. But believe me, when you start doing that, that's when you do in fact get crooked lines. Okay, so that's all there is to the stem stitch. Down in a new space, up in the one previously worked. And the idea, you do want to generally keep your thread working on the same side. Obviously, that little spot there was an exception because I wanted to make sure that my thread was guided into that little space versus having it get pushed out. There. With only one thread, the stem stitch does not end up standing out all that much, but it does make a really lovely kind of border. So I'm going to keep going on that, and then maybe I'll just show you quick how I come back up to fill in and shadow this petal as well. I showed you on the first one, but I'll give you one more example of that here. Okay. So I'm starting on the side, and that's okay. With these ones, I'm gonna come up right by my stem stitch there, and then I'm just gonna add little lines that go in towards the center that will give it kind of a variegated look. And these ones don't have to be exact. You can always go back in and add some more if you feel like you don't have enough. I do like to make 2 stitches kind of close together and have them create a bit of a V shape. I feel like that gives it a really nice, a nice effect. But again, just kind of have fun with it. That one I think I'm gonna leave on its own. Oh, I got my thread caught somewhere. All right, so I think you get the idea here. I will post some pictures in the video once I've completed this section, just to give you an idea how it's turning out. And one other thing too, though, in the pattern, I have it drawn on there with straight lines. If you want to give your petals a slightly kind of more a rougher look, you can absolutely do that. So after you work your stem stitch, if you want to work your details here, start on the outside of the line and then work towards the in, and it will give them a little bit more of a kind of a rustic, like a more textured look, which actually looks really nice on this style of flower. So I think I might end up going back there and adding that kind of little detail to some of those, just for something extra. And it's easy enough. You can always go back and add things afterwards. So if you worked it first and you're not 100% sure about it, it's all good. You can go back in and add whatever you want to it, or leave it just as is, because I'm sure no matter what, it looks great. Okay, that's all for now.